And today we're very delighted to welcome Sue Mosco to talk with us about Jewish festivals.
Thank you very much. We don't know what it's going to be like, Martin. Yes, lovely, thanks. Thanks very much, Zohar and Kelsey, for inviting me here, because they just suggested that I talk about Jewish festivals, which at the time seemed, oh yeah, I can do that on the top of my head, you know. But, of course, the minute you start looking a little bit more into something, and then go down all sorts of avenues on the internet and in books, well, I've really read quite a lot. So, some of this I'm going to have to read, because actually, it's amazing, I didn't know it at all. According to the Jewish sage, Simon the Just, civilization is based on three things: on learning, and on prayer, and on good deeds. And within the strand of learning, not only to pass on the traditions within Judaism to the next generation, but also to explain the significance of Judaism when asked by non-Jewish people. So here we are. Perfect. So, within the workings of and knowledge of Judaism, I just wonder how many people have actually got Jewish friends and so know quite a bit. Discounting me. Okay, and so it's sort of half and half. So some of it, you know, you'll know and be quite familiar with, and other things maybe new. So Maurice and I, that's Maurice on the end there. It's really nice that he's come to support me when I get in a mess. We're Reformed Jews, but I'll try to give the overview of festivals and specific practices and rituals, and especially food, a sort of overview, because there are so many different strands of Judaism, and these are just most of them. So if we say that we'll start with traditional Orthodox, and they are members of the United Synagogues, like Yeshurun in Gatley and Hale Synagogue, those two are, I would call, traditional Orthodox. And I grew up in a traditional Orthodox synagogue, even though my family really didn't keep all the rules and regulations around Shabbat, the Sabbath, and festivals. We did it mainly from a ritual point of view, but not a really religious point of view. And then quite recently, actually the Yeshurun might say, we've actually moved to become modern Orthodox, because they've had a ruling from the chief rabbi that in fact women can hold their own services. Amazing, yes. And they do that once a month, but I don't think they actually are allowed to touch the scroll. Because, not in the synagogue. Oh yes, they hold, that's right, they hold the services upstairs, the women, yes. And actually, once a year, on one of the festivals, Simchat Torah, they actually do walk round holding the scroll, but they're not allowed to open it and actually read from it. But you know, that is quite a big step. And also, I would say that Bowden Synagogue, where my first cousin, 3 times removed, is the rabbi, Rabbi Dov Lewis, I would say that his is modern Orthodox, because when his grandmother died, he invited his sister to shovel the soil, which women don't normally do. And I was actually quite surprised at that. And seemingly there are other things that are happening in that synagogue that they would call themselves modern Orthodox. And then going to the far right, the Hasidic movement, within which there are so many different strands of Hasidic Jews, mainly ultra-Orthodox, and mainly the different strands are the different places that they have come from in Eastern Europe or further afield. Like, for instance, my grandparents, and these are their candlesticks, which are very heavy, and tray, were brought over in 1895 from Russia. Latvia, on the border of Latvia and Russia. It all kept changing because of the politics out there, and because of the pogroms, they came over to England. And my grandfather was a very, very Orthodox Jew, and he went to a little synagogue that were just for people that came from that area. So these are treasured possessions. I'm not quite sure how I managed to get them from my grandparents through my mother, because my mother was one of 11 children. So, anybody could have had them, but they are a very treasured possession. Who's going to have them next is open to conjecture, since we've got 2 daughters.
You got one each?
No, that would be so devastating. I've probably knocked this, have I? No, okay, all right. So yeah, and then of course we've got quite a large number of people living in Manchester and in the country who are born Jewish, which means coming down the female line, and that's the Orthodox view, that you are born Jewish only if your mother was Jewish. Okay, on this side of the line is the interpretation of the old rules, regulations, and aspects of the Bible that have been modernized, and modern interpretation, really. That's what it's about. It's the interpretation. There's no interpretation. It says that's what you do it, and that's it. And even if things are not appropriate in this day and age, the traditions are the traditions, and the rituals are the rituals. Whereas Reform, and then Liberal going further to the left, should bring me on the other side, forgotten, are saying, well, we're going to interpret things for modern day living, and this will be different. And so driving to the synagogue on this side is absolutely permissible, and the synagogues have a car park for that reason, to encourage people to come. Whereas for Shabbat and festivals, nobody would admit to driving, even though the roads around the synagogue are actually quite busy. So, but the ruling is that you do not work on Shabbat or a festival, and you do not make fire, and so making fire is the engine firing up of the motor car, and therefore it's interpreted as you shall not drive a car or switch on the electric lights on Shabbat. Not sure about I think festivals you can. And the non-practicing people are born Jewish, but actually don't practice. And if they are a non-practicing woman, your children are still considered Jewish, because it's just in the blood, so to speak. Reform, it's always been through the woman, but now, if there is a union of a Jewish man and a non-Jewish woman who live a Jewish life and have a Jewish household, the children can be considered Jewish if you just go to the rabbi and talk to them. And liberal, it's always been man or woman that can then have Jewish children. So in fact, we say about Jewish people, the practices and the belief systems are so very different. I'm going to try and give this umbrella view, but there will be aspects that are quite different in the different strands. Okay, and really it's about what happened on Mount Zion when Moses supposedly received, or did receive, the Torah. This side believe that the Torah, the word of the God, was written down word by word, and that we will obey it. These people believe that something very special happened at Mount Zion, not just to Moses but to the whole community, and its impact was to propel the children of Israel from then to today, developing a unique moral code, enabling us to be scattered all around and persecuted at times, but actually surviving. So it's that interpretation of that word of God, or actually it was written over the years and a lot of it was orally passed down. So I think really I'm going to move on now from the different strands of belief in Judaism to just a little bit about the Torah. Yes. So the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, which we have on a scroll, takes a year for the scribe to write it, and in Orthodox synagogues it takes a year for it to be read thoroughly, end to end. Within Reform and Liberal we actually take shorter readings and choose them going on, but in a what's the sort of word? Sequential, that's it, thanks love. Sequential way, yeah. But scholars believe that the final verses that we have, the final version that we have today, was recorded during the Babylonian exile, which was around 500 years in the 1st century. Seemingly there are a few fragments of texts from them, but the oldest complete Torah is in Bologna, and it was written as late as the 11th century. So now we know a little bit about the different strands and the Torah. So when do the festivals occur, and why are they a movable feast, which they are? So the solar calendar is automatically in line with seasons, but the lunar one isn't. And not all Jewish years are the same. It's no wonder that people think we're very complicated, and without being anti-Semitic in any way, we really are. Because, I'm going to say things like that and not be criticised. 7 months out of every 19 months, we have an extra month. I know. So it's in the 3rd year, I didn't know this at all, in the 3rd year, in the 6th year, the 8th year, the 11th year, in the 14th year, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the 17th year and the 19th year, they are leap years, and we have that extra month. All very complicated. When I went to Hebrew classes as a kid, up to the age of, probably from the ages of 5 to 10, so I went to this local Orthodox synagogue Monday, Tuesday and Thursday after school, and Sunday morning. Well, that seems It's ridiculous now, but that's what happened. And I learned the months of the year. Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishri, Cheshvan, Teve, Shevat, Adar, and Adar Sheni in a leap year. And that's what I thought it was, straightforward. Nobody told us that it was anything but just straightforward like that. So now it's all done by algorithms, of course, and worked out by mathematicians. But up to the 9th century, when it was all written down, it was all made by adjustments by men, of course, and messengers. Now this is fascinating, this little bit, which I didn't know was so interesting. So, Nisan is the first Jewish month of the year, because before the Jews left Egypt, on the first day of Nisan, God told Moses and Aaron, this Chodesh, which means new moon or month, this Chodesh shall be to you the head of the months. So that's the peculiar thing. Nisan is the first month, but we begin what we call the Jewish New Year in September, in the months of Tishri. So, just going to give out these tables of months, and on one side it gives the months and the festivals, and on the other side it just gives the months, because this one here starts in Nisan, and this one here starts with the Jewish New Year. So that's another complication. If you'd like to take one and pass it on, that would be just great. So the story about how the months were worked out in the olden days it was of course fixed by the Sanhedrin, which was the high court of the highest rabbis. And on the 30th day of each month, the Sanhedrin, the Jewish court, would be open for business in a large courtyard in Jerusalem. Witnesses who claimed to have seen the new moon on the previous night would give testimony and be cross-examined. The members of the Sanhedrin were well schooled in astronomy. They knew exactly when the new moon would have appeared and where it would have been visible. Nevertheless, the sanctification of the moon depends on the crescent new moon actually being seen by 2 witnesses. Because in that sentence in Exodus, it says, this month shall be to you. And the meaning to you implies that it's actually got to be seen. So these were the questions that the rabbis and the Sanhedrin would give to the witnesses, and it's a bit like getting to the sales on time. Whoever was first in the queue got in first, and so on. Now, the rabbis knew the answers to these questions. However, and therefore were very soon picked out fraudulent witnesses. So 2 came in at a time, and the elder of the pair would be asked, tell us how you saw the moon. In which direction was it in relation to the sun? Was it the north or south? How high in the sky did the moon appear to be? In which direction were the crescent's tips facing? And how wide was it? After they'd finished questioning the first witness, they'd bring in his partner and question him similarly. If the 2 accounts collaborated, then this evidence was accepted that the new moon had been seen. However, if that the evidence wasn't accepted, the next pair were brought in. And when they were satisfied that 2 witnesses had seen the new crescent moon, they would shout out and proclaim Makudash, which I didn't know about. Makudash, and then everybody would respond Makudash, which means the new moon has been sanctified. So a whole load of performance, ritual every month. And then of course they had to publicise the new moon. Well, how did they do that? They lit bonfires, and then when those bonfires were seen, they lit more bonfires and more bonfires further and further out. And that is why, traditionally, there are 2 days for some festivals, because the bonfires took so long to reach everybody to the outer stretches of Babylonia, that actually which day is it? So we better just have 2, just in case. However, and in Israel they don't. In Israel they know which day it is, so they have a one-day festival, when often in the diaspora there are 2. But on the Day of Atonement, which we'll come to later, the day of the fast day, amazingly, we all know which day it is, so we only fast for 1 day. It's all tradition, so. And so, we know when the months of the year are. But I have to just tell you something very funny, I think. These are times when the postponement for the Rosh Hashanah festival, which is the one that you're going to read across horizontally, Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, okay, when it should start, because there are various postponements. Okay, so each year, whether it's a leap year or not, Rosh Hashanah starts the day the new moon of Tishri appears. But there are 1 of 4 conditions called postponements that have to be met, and so Rosh Hashanah is actually postponed by a day or 2. So what are these postponing rules? If Rosh Hashanah falls on a Sunday, Wednesday or Friday, it is postponed by 1 day. That is because if Shabbat gets in the way, you can't prepare food for Shabbat before the festival starts, so therefore you can't have it occurring. You can't have it occurring on a Wednesday or on a Friday. And why on a Sunday? Oh, I know why. Yes. So you can't have Rosh Hashanah appearing on those days. You've got to postpone it by a day or 2. If the new moon appears after 12 o'clock midday, Rosh Hashanah is postponed by a day, because it's already half a day's taken up. If the new day is one of those in rule number 1, that is Sunday, Wednesday or Friday, Rosh Hashanah is postponed by another day. So in a regular 12-month year that isn't a leap year, if the new moon appears more than 20 seconds past 3:11 a.m. on a Tuesday, Rosh Hashanah is postponed by 2 days. So, and it's all to do with Shabbat, yes, because the next festival, which is, as you can see, the Day of Atonement, is there a spare one there? Because I'm sort of just in front of you, Hexer, yeah?
Yep.
Thanks. Because the Day of Atonement is always 10 days after Rosh Hashanah. So, and that cannot be on a certain day. So, I'm almost on to talking about the festivals, but the thing is, as Maurice reminded me, that actually Shabbat is considered more holy than any other festival. And so we just have to have a little bit of Shabbat, because Shabbat is central to Jewish life, and certainly for this side here, Shabbat is really, and it's lovely, and so many people nowadays say it's what we should do. We should completely switch off for one day a week, one day a week, do nothing. Make lots of preparation on the Friday, do all your cooking on the Friday, finish all your business that you need to finish, tie up your ends, and then once dusk arrives and supposedly you can see 3 stars in the sky if it's no cloud, then this side here say that's it. Friday night and Saturday are days of rest. They are just for being totally Jewish and switching off from the world, really. Going to synagogue Friday night, going to synagogue Saturday morning, in the afternoon, maybe family time, maybe study time without writing. Just switch off completely. This side here say, yes, Shabbat is a very special day. Yes, do as much preparation as you can, but interpret it in a modern way. So the do no work means that you can actually choose how you spend your time. So the right hand side here would say, okay, so if that's going to see your favourite sport, then that's fine. And if you have to go in your car to go and watch City, then, or United, then that's fine. I asked the rabbi, our rabbi, Reform rabbi, what he does on Shabbat. He said I might go for a walk down by the river, I might see some friends, I might just be, so to speak. And how good is that? Wonderful. So it's a gift, really, that Jewish people have and is central to life. And it's about paying more attention, really, being really in the moment of this special day. And so the festivals all take second place, however high holy the festivals are. So that we can have Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, on Friday. It can start on Friday night and be on Saturday. But when we light the candles, do we say to sanctify the candles for Shabbat and then Rosh Hashanah, or the other way around? And it's always Shabbat first, because you can't sanctify the candles for a festival, and then the festival is in, and then start Shabbat. It has to be the other way around. So, how do we even know that we're supposed to have festivals? In the book of Leviticus, it says, "These are the festivals of the Lord, holy convocations which you shall proclaim in their appointed seasons." Okay, so the thread of festivals really is woven through Jewish life. And it's probably, it's suggested, the strongest link we have with the heritage and our link with that heritage. Festivals, like many religious festivals, are really to do with being with families and partly to do with food. But of course it's the food that we eat as a family that gives us special, unforgettable flavours. And food, of course, plays a big part in Jewish life. And in fact, it is one of the commandments to be hospitable to anyone within your reach. So I suppose we should start with Rosh Hashanah. And if Jewish people are not connected with synagogues at all during the year, on the one day in which they appear, it is on Rosh Hashanah, or maybe Yom Kippur in equal measure. So, although like churches these days, I think, synagogues find it really hard to get congregations on a Shabbat, even though we've just said that actually it's the highest of the highest regard. Our synagogue, maybe we get 60, maybe we get 70, 80 people on a good Shabbat. On Rosh Hashanah, we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. There isn't an empty seat, like on Yom Kippur. So there's that connection with Judaism from people who actually aren't connected throughout the year. So it's literally the head of the year, and Yom Teruah, it's actually called, which really is to do with a day of shouting and blasting. And blasting, you blowing the shofar. It is very, very important to hear the shofar being blown on Rosh Hashanah. However, if you're on this side, they don't blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, which I didn't know. Now, sometimes I can get a note out of this ram's horn, and sometimes I can't. And usually Morris definitely can, and he said to me, no, I'm not sure that I can anymore. And we didn't actually practice, did we, at lunchtime today? You've got to play it like you've got to blow it like a trumpet, and so make a sort of raspberry noise down the shofar. Because the shofar is a symbol for the New Year and also for Yom Kippur. It's a wake-up call, basically. Like, have you been asleep during this year? Have you not really been there in that moment? Well, here's the wake-up call to remind you that actually, how should you be behaving? How should we be behaving during the year? And so, Yom Teruah, and the rabbi would shout out things like Tekiah and Teruah, and the ram's horn would imitate it. And then something like Teruah, and I've forgotten to look it up, Hagadol, which means long. Gadol is big in Hebrew. Like it's a big long note, and then whoever's playing it takes this enormous breath. And then you hear this sound going on and on. Everybody's sort of willing the sound to go on and on and on and on and on as long as possible. And then when that person has achieved it, everybody shouts, well done, in Hebrew. So, I don't know, might make the most disgusting noise, might not make any noise at all. So, that sort of thing, lower, higher, and certainly much, much longer, is the wake-up call during the service. And if you've been dozing during the sermon, it certainly does wake you up, no doubt at all. So we've said it's the wake-up call. The Torah states that the start of the 7th month is to be consecrated as a day of rest with shofar blowing. Seemingly, it appears in Leviticus and in the book of Numbers. The sages and the commentary in the Talmud and the what's the other one, darling? The book of commentary by the rabbis. I can't think for this moment. Anyway, there are books and books written of commentary on the 5 books of Moses, and they suggest that the number 7 that's why it's on the 7th month, is a number of completeness, just as like the 7th day of the week is considered to be a sacred day because the week is completed and then we have the 7th day. And so the 7th month is a sort of day of remembrance that the whole year is completed, and so we have it during the 7th month. And so Rosh Hashanah has developed very much through rabbinic tradition. Moses established this, what was to be done, and then, as I said, it was passed down from Moses to Joshua, to the 70 elders, to Ezra, and then to mainstream Jewish tradition. So it seems that Rosh Hashanah, in its present form, has been at least from the time of the exile in 4th century BC. So, long time. Of course, I also forgot to mention that the Jewish year is not 2019. It's something like, did I look it up? Is it on here? This is a little booklet you might like to look at during the interval, the tea time, which is, oh yes, it has got the month. This is just our little booklet that's produced in the synagogue every week. And if anybody ever wanted to come to our synagogue reform, if you haven't been to a service, you are most welcome. You can come at any time. Just give me a call and say, when are you next going? And I'll tell you, and you might want to come with me. But the year is, and we are in the month of Iyar, the year is 5,779. So, and I think, when did they start counting from? I can't remember that. Was it from Abraham, maybe? No, I don't know. 5,779. So Rosh Hashanah is a celebration of being in the beginning of the new year, but it's really a day of reflection over one's deeds during the past year. Now, what I forgot to say was that I haven't brought this table, I didn't like the table, up to date. It was done by the Jewish Museum, which name was at the bottom there, and it was from, obviously, 1993 when it was published. And this shows the different days throughout these different years, up to the year 2000, when the festivals were celebrated. So nothing like, December the 25th is Christmas. It changes, just as I explained, because of postponements and various other algorithmic calculations. So Rosh Hashanah went from the 16th and 17th of September to the 6th, to the 25th, to the 14th, and then really late in 1997, so I presume the previous year was a leap year, we didn't even start till October. And then back to September, late September, middle September, late September again. So it's really impossible to understand how they worked it out, but it's all been worked out. And if you sort of Google, like, when will Rosh Hashanah be in 2025, the table comes up, which is wonderful.
This is where we get the expression a movable feast.
Absolutely. I guess it is.
Yeah.
It certainly is a movable feast. And feast it always is. So even though it's a big family time, just like Christmas is, lots and lots of food and unbelievable, it's really a day of reflection over one's deeds during the past year. Now there's a ceremony which I've never been to, and the way that they describe it in, Rabbi Jonathan Romain describes it in his book, and he's a Reform rabbi, and I really value him and look up to him as a very leading rabbi. In the afternoon of the new year is a ceremony called Tashlich. Yes. which is a ceremonial casting away of your sins into the local river or sea. And our synagogue definitely do it. It's only a few people that do it with the rabbi. They go down to the local river, say some sort of symbolic prayers, and actually cast in some small crumbs of bread into the river in the way of casting away one's sins. Something I've never done yet, but maybe I will. Maybe we will. I wouldn't think that would happen. It's supposed to signify that just as the fate of the fish in the water is uncertain, so is the fate of humanity. Or, alternatively, another point of view is that as fish never close their eyes, so is God's watchful eye ever present over us all. And as many Jews as there are in the whole world, there will be that number of opinions plus one. In our family, Rosh Hashanah does start the night before, because everything starts the night before. That's when we start a festival on Shabbat. We go to the synagogue, which is, for me, I really like it. Not as many people go on Friday night, on the evening as on the morning, but the synagogue is like my second home, so it feels really good to be there and just starting the new year. And then we would go to synagogue on Saturday, on the morning, you get a little bit of Shabbat, on the morning, whichever morning it is, and always have an extended family lunch, which is starts with something sweet to start off a sweet new year. And symbolically, people have either bread and honey or apples and honey. So I brought some honey and some apples, because if you've never experienced having a slice of apple and dipping it in the honey and eating it, it's like nectar. And then we had two not very well producing apple trees, and it was always lovely the night before to actually go and pick a couple of apples from our trees. Sometimes we're in Wales and sometimes we're here, but each place had not good apple trees, but we always got enough for New Year. And of course, because it's September, it's perfect time for getting the apples. So starting a sweet New Year, and also we would start with one of our traditional dishes, which is honey cake, which is absolutely lovely. I never usually make it, my sister-in-law does, and it's made with oil and honey, and it's very, very moist. So I phoned up the deli in Cheadle, and I said, "Hello, it's Sue Mosco here, hi, have you got any honey cake?" "Oh, I'll just go and look." So she went, "Oh yes, I've just got 2 left." I said, "Could you keep them for me? Morris will call in, thanks." Wonderful, because I'd phoned already the deli in Hale Barnes, and they said no. So I sent my trusted messenger, "Go and get the honey cakes, darling, thank you very much." And he had this very strange conversation with Lulu, who owns the Cheadle Deli. She said,
I just picked them up and brought them home, and then I decided to open them and look at them.
yeah,
I said, ginger.
it's,
Not honey.
so these were actually,
Then I found it.
oh, then you phoned up.
After I opened them at home.
I thought you had the conversation in the shop. Oh, right, okay. So Morris phoned the lady whose shop it is and said, "I thought these were honey cakes." And she said, "Yes, they have got honey in them." And he said, "Yes, but these are ginger cakes." "Yes, but they've got honey in them." Marketing. So I've brought some traditional Jewish ginger cake, which is made in exactly the same way, and does have a little hint of honey in it. Sadly, it's gluten for those people that are gluten-free. But if you're gluten-free by choice, like me, the odd little bit of ginger cake like that is well worth having. We did try and bring honey cake for you. What else do we do? Now I've missed off, of course, one strand here. No, not this, I don't think. Oh yeah, could be. Because these that I've been talking about are all Ashkenazi Jews who've come from Eastern Europe and the Pale of Settlement. But of course there are all the Sephardi Jews who were expelled from Spain and Portugal and northern Africa in 1492, and they have completely different foods, of course, and quite different traditions. And so the new synagogue in Hale Barnes, the very new, is a Sephardi synagogue. Yes, Margaret's been, I haven't. Certainly there are differences. So if I say that for Rosh Hashanah, we have in Ashkenazi, we have chopped and fried fish balls and chopped herring. They have lamb and prune tagine, which is quite different. We would never have lamb and prune tagine for Rosh Hashanah. We might have roast chicken, and we might have, occasionally maybe my sister-in-law would make lamb, but of course the foods, the ingredients are all very different. And some of the traditions are different as well. In fact, I went to a service recently in Didsbury, which is the old, beautiful synagogue, Sephardi synagogue, and they've got about 3.5 members now. It's a very aging population. They've got no young blood coming into Didsbury, into that Sephardi shul synagogue. Shul is the Yiddish word for a synagogue. It's the most marvellous building. It's a listed building. So much as they would love to sell it, something else happened to it, they can't. It can only be used for purposes for which it has been built, or, I mean, some synagogues have become mosques, and some mosques have become synagogues, and strange things have happened like that. Or where was it that we were in Morocco, where there was a mosque inside a church?
Yes.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Marrakesh.
Marrakesh, yeah, that's right. So this is our prayer book for what they call the days of awe. So we're talking about Rosh Hashanah on Yom Kippur. And in here, which is the special one for Reform synagogues, we have got so many amazing readings. And I spent hours last night and the night before reading all these wonderful things. So there are readings to prepare you for the evening of Rosh Hashanah. And one of them is by Maimonides, who was something like the 11th or 12th century great thinker. And there are so many wonderful things I could read out to you. It is a flagrant sin to say to a repentant person, remember your past deeds, or to mention them in his presence so as to embarrass him, or to recall similar incidents that are reminiscent of what he did. All this is forbidden, along with all kinds of insulting words against which Torah warns us, as it is written, you must not vex one another. And when I vexed him today, and he was very vexed, I remembered that I'd just read that. This is supposed to be in preparation for Rosh Hashanah, but really it's for every day. And I have apologised. It was, I was probably a bit pushed for time. And another wonderful reading in preparation for Rosh Hashanah is by a guy, somebody called Eugene Heimler, who was a Holocaust survivor. I felt angry with fate at having to share my compartment with a German. I knew that he was too young to have had any part of the hideous past, that he was a nice, well-mannered lad. And yet, I could not help feeling hostile and resentful towards him. I hated him because of his race, and I was ashamed of it. How could I, of all people, hate someone because of his race? When we spoke, I answered him harshly. Excuse my German, I'm not sure how to say it. Jawohl! As soon as I had said it, I was sorry. By using the German word, I had tried to humiliate him. My desire to humiliate this young man was causing me to feel guilty, and yet at the same time I asked myself why I should feel hurt for wanting to hurt a German. Then it occurred to me that this was the argument of the SS. To hurt, to kill the Jew is not a sin, it is an act of delousing. The feelings I was experiencing were not my own feelings, but theirs. I felt confused. I was doing to him what they had done to me. I was persecuting an innocent man whose only sin was that he happened to be born in Germany. And there are readings upon readings upon readings by rabbis, by great thinkers, by wonderful people. And the same for the beginning of the new year, Rosh Hashanah. And then I'm just going to talk about Yom Kippur, and we might then have a break. Maybe I'll just squeeze in Passover. Okay. So Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, 10 days after Rosh Hashanah, is an amazing day for me. And in here, there are readings for the 10 days in between Rosh Hashanah, which is the wake-up call, and Yom Kippur, which is a day of admitting personally and as a congregation for how we had been and to repent. And so there is a calendar here of repentance, the 10 days of repentance. And a useful bit here, which has been written by Louis Jacobs, which of course I've forgotten to put up, or Zohar very kindly wrote it up for me, due to my arm, is that in between traditional Orthodox and Reform, there is another group that was started by Rabbi Dr. Louis Jacobs, when he broke away, or was made to break away from traditional Orthodox, where he was a rabbi, and to sit in the middle here and to start the Masorti movement, of which we have no congregation in Manchester, but they do in London. And so it's a conservative, modern conservative synagogue, but with some beliefs from Reform and Liberal, as in men and women sit together in the service. And various other overlaps with Orthodox and overlaps with Reform. And some friends of ours who go to the services down there, because their kids are there, said it's a really lovely place to be. So on Yom Kippur, which starts the night before, of course, we fast for 25 hours with no food and no drink. Dr. Louis Jacobs has written the 4 main reasons for fasting. Okay, the most obvious reason for fasting on Yom Kippur is that this is the means by which we show contrition for the wrong we've done and the good we have failed to do. So it's as a penance. The second one is as self-discipline. And for me, who's not a very well self-disciplined person, it's really good for me. Self-indulgence, he writes, and lack of self-control frequently lead to sin. It's natural that repentance be preceded by an attempt at self-discipline. Disciplining oneself is never easy, but all religious teachers have insisted on its value. Okay, so that's the second reason for fasting. The third reason is for focusing the mind on the spiritual. It's been noted frequently that Judaism frankly recognises the bodily instincts and the need for the legitimate gratification. And yet religion seeks to encourage and foster the spiritual side of our lives. And so by fasting, the needs of the body are left unattended for 25 hours, and the Jew gives as much of his concentration as possible to things of the spirit. So that's the third reason. And the fourth is as a means of awakening compassion. Louis Jacobs says, by knowing what it means to go hungry, albeit for a day, our hearts are moved with those who suffer. By fasting, we are moved to think of the needs of others and to alleviate their suffering. So the fast begins something like, dependent on which year we're on, fast might begin at 7 o'clock in the evening, it might begin at 8 o'clock in the evening, no later than that. It might begin at 6:30, just depends which part of the month we're in. And we have a very moving service, which is called Kol Nidre. And Bruch wrote that most beautiful Kol Nidre cello music. And we're very blessed to have an ex-Halle cellist in the congregation. He's actually a non-Jewish husband of a member. And he plays, before the service starts at 7 o'clock in the evening, he plays Kol Nidre. And it just sets the tone so beautifully. It's just wonderful. And then nobody speaks, just while he moves his cello over, he moves away, and the rabbi stands in the middle. And it's like shivers down the back, really, for me. And the words Kol Nidre mean all vows. So asking forgiveness for all vows made falsely, and how our words, if our words don't match our actions, we're asking for forgiveness. So on page 262, this is taken from a very old prayer book. The first time the reader chants the Kol Nidre, he should recite it very softly. Like a man who is overawed at entering the palace of a king to seek a favour from him and is frightened to approach him. The second time, he chants it louder. The third time, he raises his voice more and more, like a man who feels himself at home and is accustomed to be a member of the king's court, and his heart swells as he approaches the king and is ready to attend his words. As a community, we stand together and we say things like, we have transgressed for deeds that we might not personally have done, but as a community may well have done. And even if not within our community, then in the bigger Jewish community. So we say things like, we have transgressed we have dealt treacherously, we have robbed. And there are lots of other things that we say as a community to sort of feel together that we're offloading really bad behaviour and intending to do better. Throughout the day of Yom Kippur, which for many people it's spent in the synagogue, and I find that I do best if I'm actually in the synagogue. So we have a morning service, and then people with families take their children home, and there's a study session. And people may go out for a walk during the study session, they may go to the study session, then go out for a walk, ready for the afternoon session, which is a really long service with another reading from the Torah. The reading for Yom Kippur is the book of Job, the story of Job. Eventually, there's the final service. And for me, that section means lots, because the service is called Na'ilah. I can't remember what that actually means. I might have written it further on. Oh yes, Na'ilah, that's right, the gates of mercy are closing. And we've got some high windows in our synagogue, and we can start to see that it's dark. It's beginning to get dark. And we always sing this Na'ilah song just as it's beginning to get dark. And you think, the feeling is, I'm nearly there now. We're almost there. It might be another hour and a half, but we're almost there. So this is all the vows, and actually, Kol Nidrei, which I didn't know, is actually an Aramaic declaration. It's written in Hebrew, but it's actually Aramaic. When we get to this final section, and I will stop after this final section, there is the most amazing reading, and I just want to finish with this. And then we go and break the fast with family. And the tradition, you've not drunk and you've not eaten for 25 hours, you desperately want a cup of tea. That's all that everybody wants is a cup of tea. And also we've got really lovely Jewish bread, the platir challah, which is quite a sweet bread. And one year, I remember, we usually go to my sister-in-law's to break the fast, and she's there pouring the cups of tea and slicing the lovely bread, and all you want is loads of butter on it. Somehow it's like comfort food completely. And I had, I think, 5 slices of bread and butter, and then I suddenly said to everybody, I've forgotten I'm gluten-free now. But because it was such a tradition, And as Morris says, it didn't do you any harm, did it? So, but at the end of this service is a reading by Kafka. It's taken me a long time to actually understand what it's about. And every year my brother and I say, well, what do you think it's about this year? We read the same thing every year. So this is by Kafka. It's quite long, but then we'll have a cup of tea. And I've brought, along with ginger cake, brought some cheesecake, because as my friend reminded me, we're almost at the festival of, the bottom festival, Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks. And it's a celebration, it's one of the pilgrim festivals. I can talk a bit about pilgrim festivals afterwards. And that Shavuot is the celebration of being given the Torah. Not the beginning of the reading of the Torah, because that is a Simchat Torah, and we end it and begin to read it again, but we celebrate the giving of the Torah to Moses. And seemingly we eat dairy foods, and I've never really known why we eat cheesecake at Shavuot. But the good Mrs. Google tells me that because they were promised going to the land of milk and honey, and so something sweet, cheesecake was made, and there's the honey cake again, but also another reason is that the dietary laws, of course, were given, and the separating from milk and meat, and how you had to kill the animals in a certain way. And because they didn't have any animals who had been koshered, so they couldn't eat any, they now know that they mustn't eat any meat from animals which are not killed in the right way, which is all very contentious, and I won't go into that bit. So they didn't have any meat, so they could only eat dairy foods, milk foods, and so cheesecake fits in beautifully with that. And it may well just be because somebody made it up. You know, you can never tell. Anyway, so the end of Yom Kippur, so we've got to this ending, it's fantastic, and I always make sure to read this bit. It's not part of the service, because here we are, the shofar is sounded, Tekiah Gedolah, and then that's the end of it, and it says, next year, go on your way, eat your bread with joy, and drink your wine with a good heart, for already God has accepted your labour, according to Ecclesiastes. But the reading is, before the law is always capital L, before the law stands a doorkeeper on guard. To this doorkeeper there comes a man from the country who begs for admittance to the law. But the doorkeeper says he cannot admit the man at this moment. The man, on reflection, asks if he will be allowed then to enter later. It is possible, answers the doorkeeper, but not at this moment. Since the door leading into the law stands open as usual, and the doorkeeper steps to one side, the man bends down to peer through the entrance. When the doorkeeper sees that, he laughs and says, "If you are so strongly tempted, try to get in without my permission. But note that I am powerful, and I am only the lowest doorkeeper. From hall to hall, keepers stand at every door, one more powerful than the other. Even the third of these has an aspect that even I cannot bear to look at." These are difficulties which the man from the country had not expected to meet. The law, he thinks, should be accessible to every man and at all times. But when he looks closely at the doorman in his furred robe, with his huge pointed nose and long thin tartar beard, he decides that he had better wait until he gets permission to enter. The doorkeeper, gives him a stool and lets him sit down at the side of the door. There he sits for days and years. He makes many attempts to be allowed in and wearies the doorkeeper with his persistence. The doorkeeper often engages him in brief conversation, asking him about his home and about other matters. But the questions are put quite impersonally, as great men put questions, and always conclude with the statement that the man cannot be allowed to enter yet. The man, who has equipped himself with many things for his journey, parts with all he has, however valuable, in the hope of bribing the doorkeeper. The doorkeeper accepts it all, saying, however, as he takes each gift, "I take this only to keep you from feeling that you have left something undone." During all these long years, the man watches the doorkeeper almost incessantly. He forgets about the other doorkeepers, and this one seems to him the only barrier between himself and the law. In the first years, he curses his evil fate aloud. Later, as he grows old, he only mutters to himself. He grows childish, and since in his prolonged watch he has learned to know even the fleas of the doorkeeper's fur collar, He begs the very fleas to help him to persuade the doorkeeper to change his mind. Finally, his eyes grow dim, and he doesn't know whether the world is really darkening around him or whether his eyes are only deceiving him. But in the darkness, he can now perceive the radiance that streams immortally from the door of the Lord. Now his life is drawing to a close. Before he dies, all that he has experienced during the whole time of his sojourn condenses in his mind into one question, which he has never put to the doorkeeper. He beckons the doorkeeper, since he can no longer raise his stiffened body. The doorkeeper has to bend far down to hear him, for the difference in size between them has increased very much to the man's disadvantage. "What do you want to know now?" asked the doorkeeper. "You are insatiable." "Everyone strives to attain the law," answered the man. How does it come about then that in all these years no one has come seeking admittance but me? The doorkeeper perceives that the man is at the end of his strength and that his hearing is failing, so he bellows in his ear, "No one but you could gain admittance through this door, since this door was intended only for you. I am now going to shut it." So we'll leave the festivals, we'll leave Kafka, do as you wish with it, and good idea, darling. Right, I'll just quickly go through these, which we can talk about later after tea. So this is a Hanukkah, our family Hanukkah that we use for the festival of Hanukkah. This was one that another design somebody gave me very kindly. And this is one that I found in the charity shop in Altrincham, which is the Chabad Lubavitch, one of the Hasidic groups, produced these for people that are travelling during Hanukkah. So you can take your lightweight, tinny Hanukkah away with you. And I bought this and this, all £1.99, and I knew it would come in handy sometime. We don't, if we're travelling, take our travelling Hanukkah. These are my family candlesticks, the silver cup which we use to bless the wine on Shabbat and festivals, which has got an engraving to Morris's father on the occasion of Morris's father and mother's marriage. These little ones were given to me as a gift from a friend who went to Jerusalem on some anniversary. We bought those. Oh, it seems that we bought those. Quite a lot. Oh, right. Yeah, it's got aspects of Jerusalem. We bought them, that's right, that's quite right. This is a beautiful bread cloth, a challah cloth, that my friend bought us as a new house gift and that we use every Shabbat and beginning of the festival. These are to do with Passover, and we can talk about Passover later. This is the traditional Haggadah, a book that we use for the service at home on the eve of Passover. Oops, too near that. So these are to keep the children amused, and there are lots of big pictures and moving pictures and things that are missing now because the kids have used them so much. And then there's a more, of course the book opens supposedly back to front, right to left, not left to right. And this is a sort of more traditional Haggadah. This is a really lovely modern interpretation and even opens the traditional way of opening books, written by an Israeli but published in America. And it is sort of trying to bring Passover up to date and trying to engage everybody at different ages, and even ask the kids to do some drawings in it to keep them amused. And it's supposed to be in order to make the Passover service, the Seder, which means the order, because we follow an order all the way through. In everyone it's the same order, but in here is this modern reflection of, well, what is it in 2021? How do we make it appropriate? And this is one of our Passover plates, and these are all symbolic foods that we would put on here: the shank bone of the lamb, and the bitter herbs, and the egg, and we have it in salt water, and we can talk about that later. And so have a little look, and you're welcome to take these little things here and to have a look at the prayer book. And in fact, this is a illustration from a book. It was called My Grandmother's Stories, and it is showing a very traditional Hasidic family having their Passover meal, and you can see that in fact telling the story of the Exodus from Egypt, when the Jews left Egypt as slaves and were 40 years in the wilderness, and that there is a Haggadah there showing that is actually Passover. It can't, is it? Yes, it is. Yes. And in the middle it's something covered up. Looks as if it's a bread, but it's a pile of matzah, because we've got 3 matzahs in the middle as part of the ceremony. So I hope you enjoy the food. Please dip apples in honey. I'm going to wash my hands and cut up the apples, and I better take this off. It's 25 to 5. I'm just going to do a quick 10 minutes on 1 or 2 festivals that I've not mentioned, and then questions, which I may or may not, we may or may not be able to answer. Because, you know, we only know what we know. Now, there are 3 pilgrim festivals mentioned in the Bible. The 3 are Passover, Shavuot, which we've just eaten the cheesecake for, and Sukkot. And these are when the ancient Israelites living in the kingdom of Judah would have made a pilgrimage, so they're called the 3 pilgrimage festivals to the temple in Jerusalem, as commanded in the Torah. In Jerusalem they would participate in festivals and rituals at the services in the temple. These were like harvest festivals, and people had to take really tithes up to Jerusalem and I don't know what happens with tithes. Like income tax, yes, you're quite right, like income tax, okay. Now, after the destruction of the Second Temple, and this is what the Hasidic people believe, I suppose all Jews do, and until the building of the Third Temple, when we're waiting for the Messiah to arrive, and our Messiah to arrive, the actual pilgrimages are no longer obligatory and no longer take place on a national scale. The reading from the book of Exodus is, offer a sacrifice to me 3 times each year. Keep the festival of Matzah, the unleavened bread, the reaping festival, Shavuot, and the harvest festival, Sukkot. 3 times each year, every male among you must appear before the God, the Lord. Keep the festival of Shavuot, the dairy through the first fruits of your wheat harvest. And then it says about Passover, safeguard the month of standing grain, so that you will be able to keep the Passover to the Lord your God, since it was the month of standing grain that God your Lord brought you out of Egypt at night. Then count 7 weeks for yourself. From the time that you first put the sickle to the standing grain, you must count 7 weeks. And so 7 weeks after Passover is then Shavuot. So of those 3 festivals, Passover really is the big one, when there is no eating of any leavened bread. And it's, the word in Hebrew is chametz. So you wouldn't have any chametz in the house if you were very orthodox. No, you wouldn't be able to, they wouldn't keep any, in fact the whole of this side, they wouldn't keep any unopened packet of biscuits, nothing. So it can either be symbolically sold to anybody that will buy it for like a penny or anything, or it must be got rid of. On the right hand side, the rabbis say, put it in a box, and put the box somewhere that you're not going to be tempted to eat it. And that's fine by us. So what do we actually mean by chametz? Any flour of the 5 species of grain which is mixed with water and allowed to ferment before baking comes under the definition of chametz. That is wheat, spelt, oats, barley and rye. In fact, any of them that you mix with water and then they will swell. So apart from, of course, specially made matzah, like water biscuits, except it's specially produced kosher matzah, it is actually made of wheat. So there is a conundrum, but the sages established that the time necessary for the fermentation process to take place is 18 minutes after the water has been added to the flour. So the time when the mixture is being processed, kneaded and rolled out is not part of these 18 minutes. However, once the dough has been kneaded, the fermentation is delayed and the mixture will not become chametz. Once it's mixed with the water, and then within 18 minutes it's got to be mixed with water, baked and out of the oven. So that's why it's flat, it's just not had time to rise. And of course that's supposed to be symbolic, because when the children of Israel were told, right, get out, go out now, you know, you're going to escape from Egypt, they didn't have time for their bread to rise, and they seemingly went without it rising, and so that's how the story goes in the Bible. Seemingly, the bread didn't have time to rise, so therefore we eat matzah. And it's really like a big spring clean, because it's always at sort of Easter time. And lots of families go to really huge amounts of trouble. So all the pots and pans of traditional Jews, Orthodox Jews traditionally, are changed, just in case. I know, so like your eyebrows have gone up. Like, it is. And I remember going through a really religious phase when I was about 12, 11 maybe, and I drove a mother mad, you know, about changing the pots and the pans and everything else. And lots of all Orthodox families change everything. Everything comes out of the shelves and the Passover stuff is put on it. Some people now go to places that sell really quite nice plasticky stuff, and they buy quite nice plasticky stuff and keep it for the 8 days. And all the baking, all the meals have not got to, if you're Ashkenazi Jew, have not got to have anything that's rising. So we can't have rice, because rice swells, as in does couscous, as in quinoa. However, the Sephardi Jews do eat rice. I don't get it, but because it swells, but that's all right. That's all part of theirs. So it's in order to make it very different, and the whole cooking is very different. And I remember my mother making homemade apricot jam, which you couldn't buy kosher jam in those days. Homemade angimas, as she called it, or as it is known, which was beetroot jam with slithers of almonds in it. And it was very sweet and very delicious on buttered matzah. I could really, and my aunts used to make it as well. It's so traditional because everything had to be made in those days. Nowadays, the Orthodox side will go to special shops in North Manchester, and the shop will only be open during Passover, and they will sell kosher jam that's got a kosher label on it, and kosher sugar and kosher everything else. Yes, kosher for Passover, that's right. And I don't want to like say how ridiculous it is, but to me it seems ridiculous because there's been a rabbi watching that no chametz, like nobody's sandwich like they're eating, has got into the jam or into the sugar or into the anything. But that is how it is, and it's a tremendously expensive week because everything's got to be bought fresh, everything. And it's got to have this little label on. And it's a lot of families are finding it really, really very difficult to do it and to keep kosher for Pesach. My friend loves baking for Passover, Pesach. Her baking used to be so terrible. Actually, it had improved this year, I noticed mine. Liz's. And she said, well, actually, you know, it's supposed to taste different. So it's almond macaroons, yes? And even I killed almond macaroons this year. They were bad, weren't enough. The first tray were very, very raw. I made them too big. The second tray were all right. They, you know, it didn't last very long, but the first tray was a bit difficult to eat. But my friend said it's supposed to be different because that's what it's about. It's about the difference. We're free now. During the Seder service, there is a time when we said we must remember to lean. And you're supposed to have cushions, so you lean on the table because you're free now. You're not a slave. You're not having to keep a straight back and get on with your work, get building these things for Pharaoh, so you can lean. And it's all very symbolic. The egg is it's a bit like Easter, it's a bit like symbol of life. The parsley is for the fresh growth because it's Easter time and things are just starting to grow. I don't quite know the difference between the lettuce and the thing there. The haroset is something that you make from walnuts and a little bit of kosher wine and chopped apple, and nowadays just put it in the food processor, and it looks disgusting. And of course it all goes very browny, and it's supposed to resemble the mortar from the building of Pharaoh's wonderful pyramids or whatever, and it's the mortar that they use. And actually it's really lovely. And a certain time during the service you have to eat that with matzah, which is lovely. The shank bone of the lamb is because Jews were told that they had to kill a lamb and put the blood on the doorposts, and so God would pass over, and would not kill the firstborn son. And sadly, that is what happened with the Egyptian families. The bitter herbs, traditionally, it's a white horseradish that you shred, and you have that with the matzah, and it's quite bitter, and it's supposed to be for the hard times that they had. And then you eat it with the haroset, which is also for the hard times, but there's a sweetness about it as well because we're not slaves anymore, we're free. And then there's always a bowl of very, very, very salty water. Only this time I made it very, 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 very salty water. And people said, oh my God, that's salty sooner. And the eggs, you're supposed to have the eggs in the salt water and take some of the salt water for the tears of the hard times. So it's all wonderful symbolism. So yes, Passover is one of the pilgrim festivals, Shavuot and Sukkot. Now the two that are not mentioned in the Bible are Hanukkah, this one here, which I can't go into because we haven't got time, and Purim. But we mentioned Purim a few, was it last time? Yeah. And basically Purim is about Queen Esther saving the Jews from persecution from Ahasuerus, and it was about the year of about 480 BCE, yeah. So in the 1st century. And the king Ahasuerus seemingly is equivalent to Xerxes. And Esther was the queen of Persia, and she saved the Jewish people from persecution by all sorts of means that we haven't got time to go into. It's a very long, wonderful story. But if you can ever go to synagogue during Purim, we read the book of Esther, and every time the baddie's name, Haman, is mentioned, there are boos and hisses and all sorts of things going on. Then Hanukkah, again, is not mentioned in the Bible because that took place probably about the 2nd century BCE to commemorate the rededication of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, because the king of Syria had allowed the Jews to practice their religion, but then that was Antiochus III, but then his son decided, no, the Jews can't practice their religion at all, and he ordered them to have to worship the Greek gods. And then there was a massacre, basically, that took place. But seemingly a very small number, so the story goes, of Jewish guerrilla fighters, really, managed to overcome the Syrian army, and they then rededicated the temple. These are supposed to be symbolic of little pots of oil. And in the temple, as in every synagogue, there is an everlasting light, symbol of God's everlasting presence. But the story goes that when the temple was desecrated, there was just one little pot of oil left with a seal on. And so, what are we going to do once we've lit this? There's only going to be one, and then there's going to be no light in the temple. So they sent messengers on a 4-day journey to go and get some freshly pressed olive oil from the first pressing, and all had to be kosher. So it's going to be 4 days there and 4 days back, an 8-day journey. And would you believe it, that the miracle is, supposedly, that this pot of oil lasted for 8 days and nights. So it's a magical story for the children to have. And Hanukkah is just about Christmas time, and so it's quite nice. The Jewish children who are feeling very put out that there's no Christmas tree, like our kids, Claire was very put out that we didn't have a Christmas tree, and that we weren't going to celebrate Christmas in the traditional way at all. But we will celebrate Hanukkah, and of course the Americans have now made Hanukkah really, really big and commercialised it, and it's now all big presents and everything else, and it's like the Jewish Christmas. It's actually nothing to do with the kids get presents, everybody gets presents, and it's all to do with a miraculous story. And my father gave me a lovely story. This is the end, because he was brought up from the age of about 11 in the Jewish orphanage down in London in Norwood, and they played the traditional dreidel game, which is basically a spinning top game, and it's got like a dice, and you've got to do different things. Nowadays it's put Smarties in or take them out of the centre and whoever wins and all the rest of it. But they played with hazelnuts, and that was their token of putting it in and taking it out and having fun. And the dreidel game, amazingly, has kept going for, I think, centuries. And all, even our very sophisticated, grandsons who are doing all this, they'll join in the dreidel game. It's quite remarkable. So I could tell you loads and loads, and we could be here all night, but I'm not going to. So, first come, first served with any questions. Yes? Oh, Kath!
If we're going back to the fire at the beginning.
Sorry?
Going back to the fire.
The fire, yes.
If somebody switches the engine on, would the Jewish person be allowed to drive the car?
It's all very technical, isn't it? It's an interesting one, isn't it? I can't speak for the Orthodox, but I would think that it would not be in the spirit of, and that's how it's often interpreted, not in the spirit of Shabbat. Now, the only thing is, the Orthodox people used to have what was called, which sounds a bit derogatory, a non-Jewish person coming in, yes, to light the fire. Margaret can say, what, lighting fires? Yes. Right, so Margaret can tell you. Yes, so, that seems to be not in the spirit of it, that if somebody else comes in, because it does say in the 10th commandment, and neither your man or maidservant may do that, because I suppose they're members of the household.
The other question was, if you can't strike a match, how do you light your candles?
Yes, you're allowed to strike the match, and the minute the candles are lit, it is then Shabbat.
Okay.
Right, thank you. And then we say the blessing. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know your name. Yeah.
Shall I go first? Thanks very much for the presentation, it's great. But do you think the complexity and the rules prevent a lot of conversion to Judaism?
Well, that's an interesting question. The left-hand side here, who are really on the right, so to speak, they don't encourage people to convert to Judaism. You have to go and ask on 3 separate occasions. And then they do make it very difficult, because you have to live with a Jewish family for a minimum of a year. And that's not an easy thing to do with an Orthodox Jewish family. Whereas Reform and Liberal, we welcome people to join us. And we say it's not that we are marrying out, if it's a marriage, it's that people are marrying in. And obviously there has to be classes, they have to know quite a lot. At the end of maybe 2 years, they have to go down to the Reform London Beth Din, the Court of Rabbis, to be quizzed on all sorts of stuff. And then there's an immersion into what's called the mikveh, a sort of cleansing pool. It did used to be only women, but in Reform I now read that it is men and women that have to go and do an immersion and then come out as cleansed, so to speak. So yes, there is a welcome on one side and a reluctance to welcome on the other side. Yeah. However, this the Chabad, if you could actually, the websites of Chabad.org are really good, and they really are very clear about their side of the story, and they are very open to Jewish people who maybe are a bit lapsed, because the Chabad rabbi for Sale Synagogue used to live down our road, and on a Saturday morning he would be going to synagogue, as would some of his congregants, and Morris may well have been cleaning the car. Now, cleaning the car is definitely work, right, and would not be recognised as being appropriate. However, the Chabad rabbi stopped to speak and say, "How are you doing, Morris?" Da, 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 da. the congregants like pretended they hadn't seen him, because to Chabad, every slightly lapsed Jew is is what am I trying to say?
Potential.
Yes, potential to join the clan, basically. Yeah. So they're very open for Jews, but not very open to conversion. Margaret.
My question is about the females not being able to carry the Torah. Females can read from the Torah, am I right?
Certainly in our side, we can do everything.
But in the Orthodox?
In the Orthodox, because you might be a menstruating woman, even though we're 70 or 80, yes. Miracles do happen, therefore we are unclean, therefore we can't touch the scroll.
I found that amazing, but
Yeah. And my friend Liz, who's my go-to for all questions about orthodoxy, she says that women are not obligated to carry out all the mitzvahs and all the acts, all the rules and regulations. You're not obligated to go to the synagogue, because a woman's place is to cultivate her very large family. So, in other words, women are let off. It's not that they're thought of as secondary beings, but that they're not obligated to carry out the commandments, basically.
It could be considered a very neat way of getting out of facing the fact.
Donnie, I know that. Yes, of course it may be a very neat way, but that is the...
What was that, please? Because we couldn't hear it.
Yeah, okay, what Morris was saying was that maybe it's a very neat way of getting out of this male-female thing.
For the rabbis.
That there's no obligation for women.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're excused.
Basically excused, yes. But, I mean, the truth of the matter is, very Orthodox families do have a lot of children, yes. In my grandmother's day, of course, there was no contraception, so having 11 children was very normal. And these days, there are still very large families, mainly in North Manchester, North London, and such like.
In her arms, he's got 9 or
Nine
children.
Nine,
He's got 9
yes.
children
Yeah.
on her boss.
Yeah. So, there's a lot to do in that household. Yeah.
With fasting, does that include not having any water?
Yeah.
Because I'm worried about health issues,
Health issues, people are excused. Yes. Yeah, so I have to take one tablet in the morning, so I do have a little gulp. Yeah.
There's also people becoming dehydrated and in very hot weather.
Yeah, certainly the synagogue can get very hot particularly if it's early September, which, sometimes it can be. Middle, if we look at all those 7 years, yeah. It doesn't seem to be an issue. Obviously, if you're not well, you don't fast in the first place. And it's people over the age of 13.
I still haven't quite understand what is the Talmud for.
The Talmud is rabbinic commentary on the Torah. So,
5 books of Moses.
debating, what does this mean, what does that mean? All Jewish learning is learning and then discussing.
I see.
Yes? And then these discussions have been written down over the centuries. Yes?
I see. But I also heard from a rabbi that the Jewish people have 3 levels of soul, and the Christians only have 2.
I don't know. I can't.
I heard that.
Yeah. Don't know. Sorry. And the trouble is that unless we actually get it from the horse's mouth, And which is the horse, you know? Which horse are we talking about? Yeah, yeah. Ron?
If I were being asked by someone, what is the essence of Judaism, what kind of answer could I give you?
Well, that's interesting, Ron, because I said that to our rabbi, because myself and my sister-in-law and a few other people take schools around the synagogue, because a lot of them have to, it's done the curriculum somewhere, studying another religion other than Christianity. And basically, I mean, those, the bit that said about civilization, which was about studying, I can't find my post-it now, which was about studying, wasn't it? And it was about, what else did he say? About civilization. But basically the rabbi said, tell the children this. We believe in one God, okay? We believe that Jesus was a fantastic teacher, but not the Son of God. And that's the main difference between Judaism and Christianity. So we don't believe in the Trinity, it is just one God. The second is about, and it's really neat because I write the word God on the board for the children, then I say to them, add another vowel. So basically, number 2 is about being a good person. I mean, it doesn't differ really from humanity. So that's the second thing I've got to tell the children. And being a good person, as a Jewish person, is there's all those 613 commandments. Some of them major, like Shabbat. Some of them minor, like remembering to say a blessing for absolutely everything. You know, if we're going to, even the washing of the hands is very important. Every time you wash your hands, you must say a blessing. So it's what constitutes a good Jew, yes? And it's basically, depends on your interpretation, doesn't it? The left-hand side there would say being a good Jew means keeping to the letter of the law for Shabbat, completely and utterly. So that's open to interpretation. And the third thing is about preserving a good world, so looking after the world in whatever that means. But you know, those 3 really overlap with Christianity and with so many other religions, but it's what does it mean to be a good Jew? And that's where it comes. Yeah. So God, good and good.
Isn't there one other thing that I believe that in Judaism, that you should never call the name of God? In other words, it should never be voiced.
Well, certainly Orthodox Jews will not write the word God, G-O-D. They always put G-D. Yes. And in the Torah, in the writing of the Torah, there are lots and lots and lots of different ways of writing the word God. And if the scribe, because it's all written by hand, if the scribe makes a mistake in writing the name of God, that whole piece of parchment has to be taken out. You can't alter the name of God. So some scribes, it seems, leave a space every time you're going to write the word God that day, then go and wash their hands, say the blessing over the washing of their hands, and then fill in so that they're in the right frame of mind. They are only focusing on writing the word God. Yeah.
I must say a funny thing, because I had a very good conversation with a gentleman in the aeroplane, and then he turned out to be Jew, because he said to me, he can't shake my hand, it's not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Now what is very strange is that there was an Orthodox Jew sitting next to me who had already 14 children, and he said, he put his hand out to shake my hand.
Yes.
How is it possible?
Because it's all...
Orthodox shake hands, and the other one who you think is...
Yeah, because it's all in the interpretation.
Oh, I see.
You know, of what does it mean? There'll be there's something written about not making physical contact, because again, of the same menstruation business and the unclean, yes? And there are all sorts of rules and regulations about married people. They must sleep together in certain times of the month, they must be separate certain times of the month, which is supposed to keep the marriage absolutely alive and kicking, because by the time you come back to one another, you're so delighted to see one another that there goes another baby. There we have another one, keeps it all fresh. So yes, it's all in the interpretation. Yes, so that second rabbi might have thought, this is an older woman, it's absolutely fine, I can, you know, I can shake the hand.
Put my bad hand and may I have a good look at it?
No, I mean
Orthodox
rabbis would not shake. The traditional Orthodox and Hasidic, all these. Modern Orthodox might.
But it's strange. I didn't expect it, you see.
Yes.
I didn't expect it.
I know, it can fit.
He put the hand out.
Yes.
And wanted to shake my hand.
Yeah.
So I did.
Yeah. I'm afraid it is time that we really must stop. We've overrun. So thank you very much for your interest. Thank you, Hefsi and Zebar.